2061 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room and taken downstairs to the arms room. You saw today I posted up the seal on the arms room, the picture of the doorway. It was renovated with no expense spared and not following normal military protocol. It was an illegal order to renovate the room because they, of course, um, they tampered with the evidence, right? They tampered with the evidence. So he was taken there, and of course, unfortunately and brutally, his life was taken from him, and he was stolen off of Fort Bliss because the cartel were involved in this, and the cartel were infiltrated on Fort Bliss. And this was the Mormon faction cartel. I want to make that very clear. This is a Mormon faction cartel that's involved with the funeral and mortuary operations fraud. And I'll go into that today because I think it's very important for people to know all the connections here and the fraud that has been that has been committed on our military bases and in our government. And we know we have a lot of fraud, and people, we have a fraud unit now, right? So, and our son was taken, trafficked over to Juarez for disposal, and evidence also indicates that they harvested his organs. And I did want to put together, and I'm working on it, an update of what's going on in the organ trafficking, um, or the organ donations, uh, medical sector in the United States. What's going on there? And I can tell you that right now, um, President Trump his administration is working really hard to change how the whole black market of organs, the organ harvesting, um, legal and illegal. They're really um, making some moves when it comes to that because there's a huge problem with the black market and organ harvesting, organ black market sales, and um, yeah, and it's a really touchy subject because uh, you have so many questions on organ harvesting, and then you have those that are very, very sick that need an organ transplant. And why are they getting sick like that? Just putting questions out there because this trafficking um, seems to be controlled on every side to create a problem so that they can be the answer to a problem. And and I'm sure many people besides us and our over 5 years of investigating this have seen the same thing in their experiences in life. So, okay, let's really get started today. I wanted to talk about um, what triggered it is the death of the owner of OnlyFans. When we started, like over 5 years ago, I didn't even know what OnlyFans. I called it Fans Only or whatever. I didn't even know what it was. That's just not my realm at all in life, and I'm sure that Richard, not that he he grew up with so many different experiences. But I'm sure that he was just absolutely shocked by this cartel grooming, sex cult, and targeting of our soldiers because that is what they were doing. They were targeting our soldiers so that they could traffic with impunity without having whistleblowers. Because if they could compromise our soldiers, they could absolutely exploit our system and our military and traffic with impunity and make money off of it too, and also commit fraud with the VA benefits, with the soldiers, their bonus pay, everything. They knew everything, um, and they exploited it. And so we've, talked to so many people when we were there, and they were shaking in their boots about um, giving us answers, but a lot of people did quietly because this group is the El Paso Mormon faction cartel philanthropists in alliance with the Mexican cartel. And when I say philanthropists, I mean with billionaires. And these billionaires, there's not a lot of billionaires, they hang out together. The the thought that El Mayo and his daughter Monica and everything did not know the El Paso philanthropist is just silly. It's just so silly. Of course they know each other. They compete with one another and they also work with one another. These are monopolies. These are huge power structures in land holdings, like real estate, warehouses, um, eh, restaurants, shops, convenience stores, sports teams, oil and gas, energy sectors, uh, you know, and of course, all of the illegal, the sex cult, the drugs. And I think that is, um, it just, it's really, well, I'm just going to tell you from our opinion, our family's opinion, um, how this all came about. Okay. Been reading a lot about it. If you are part of this Mormon movement that created this Mormon faction and have more information, which people have reached out to me and given me more information. Thank you so much, and God bless you for this, because this is something that needs to be spoken about from somebody from the inside. And I'm only a little bit of the inside. Okay, I'm only a little bit of the inside, and I'll tell you why. Because I was born at White Sands Missile Range, and I went to school in El Paso. And my father was a missile repairman. Um, and of course, that was years and years ago when Operation Paperclip was a thing, right? Was a thing. And what was Operation Paperclip? Operation Paperclip brought in a lot of Germans after World War II, and my they brought them into Fort Bliss in El Paso, and of course to White Sands Missile Range, and they were there for a long time. They were there for a long time, and and the whole so for the Mormon side of it, um, the Mormons, are known to be polygamists, which I think is their biggest problem. It is it is so damaging because they're always looking for a boyfriend and a girlfriend. They're always looking for it's so damaging. I just can't this research, they need to end that. They need to end that and do as God says, one woman, one husband, one wife, the nuclear family. That absolutely, and I know that many of them do that, but even in the United States right now, there's a lot of covering up for the polygamists. Absolutely, they're still engaged in it. But years ago, they when the law in the United States came to be that outlawed polygamy, a big group of Mormons went to Mexico. They went over the border to Mexico, to Chihuahua, Mexico, right over the border. These were Americans, and they built colonies. They built colonies right there in Chihuahua. And famous name, you would know the Romneys, and I think Romney's grandfather. I think he had like six wives, maybe more. I think it was six wives though, but a lot of children, a lot of grandchildren. And I think it's his grandfather, maybe it's his great grandfather, but um, that's a really famous name. There's others, like the Wettons, the Colin Wettons, the Farnsworths. The Farnsworths are in our son's case as well as the Charlie Kirk case. Farnsworth are a lot in Arizona, um, also. So you have these names, and they had very, very large families. Like one of them I read today had like 51 grandchildren. You know, some of them, I mean, they could have that many children if they had a lot of wives. So, very large families, and there were encroachments then on Mexican land. Okay. And one of the things I read that I thought was very, very interesting about this Mormon faction over there in Mexico is that they did not have to answer to the local Mexican government. They only answered to the governor. Now, if you're in the know of that, please let me know if I'm wrong, but I thought that was very interesting because of the water encroachment, the land encroachment, and battles going on, even though there was times in there where they went back to the states and came, I'm just going to highlight a few points. Okay, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but because there is so much history to all this. But I just think it's a very interesting point that they wanted the rights from the governor of Chihuahua to have weapons. And you see that today with La Linea. They are the weaponized group from Nova Casa Grandes, which is the valley there, the Colonial Dublin, Colonial Juarez, which has Colonial Juarez has their temple was built there. It's one of, I think it's well, like their smallest temple, but it's a temple there. They also have a boarding school there. Um, a lot of money, y'all. A lot of money. And they are actively engaged with the cartel. Okay. We know that with the Labarons. We know that with the Wettons. And the the amount of evidence that we have, they so sometime in this time frame, which is like 100 years, right? They maybe they married into it and all of that. They absolutely were engaged with the cartels. And but you had Operation Paperclip, which was these Germans that came over and were officers. They were the scientists. They were very, very clever people. Very clever. But not all of them were good. Not all of them were good. And I know that because my parents were part of the German American Club. And there was a major killing during that time. Um, and we could talk for hours, but some of these Germans might have belonged to the party in Germany, the party that wasn't too good, the party that wasn't too good, but very clever. Okay, very clever. and that they were rocketeers, and they knew math. They knew how to finance, they knew how to make financial instruments. They knew and so this let's just say this was a faction too. This was a faction too, and they were there. And we know through Alexander Gerhard Hofmann that they intermarried with this Mormon faction. Okay, they intermarried, and so that is really important because that gave them access to um, scientific experiments and intelligence. It gave them access to what was going on at White Sands Missile Range when it came to the development of drones. That was a big deal, a very, very big deal. And you see that, of course, Jeffrey Epstein in that map I put up today. Oh my gosh, it just shows you what perfect real estate I should say JE picked, right? What he had right there on the north call up of the restricted airspace for White Sands Missile Range, right? And then showing the whole fuel and trade trafficking route that intersected really, when you think about it, going to the Middle East, it intersected at Little St. James, right? That little island, was like the crisscross. If you haven't seen my map today, it's just an amazing thing. I don't know if I can post it up right now, but it was just an amazing little map just to see the positions of this real estate and that it was not chosen just out of the blue. This is prime real estate in the middle, in the flow, key parts of the flow of the trafficking, and also um, fuel trade, energy trade going over to Iran. And you see that with the Iran Contra. Um, this is like Iran Contra on steroids, right? And so, all of this development of this very organized trafficking, organizing the cartels, the different branches of cartels, and keeping it at bay as well as they could, and making billions and billions of dollars every year. And so when I say that this is the El Paso Mormon uh, faction cartel, it's those from the colonies that encroached into El Paso, and more and more. Okay, not just El Paso, but into our military, into our intelligence community, and they probably were met, um, with others, with others. That's why I'm saying they're a Mormon faction cartel in alliance with the Mexican um, cartels, and also with the Iranian faction and the Chinese faction. Um, and so when I say the El Paso Mormon cartel, these are alliances that, because of the real estate, El Paso is the doorway into the United States for this trafficking, and really the place where all of this, like everything is, just becomes an epicenter to there. And of course, Fort Huachuca is the signal and the intelligence hub, but not the epicenter like El Paso, that whole way up to Zorro Ranch. Um, you see Juarez there, and there's no question why Juarez was such a dangerous place, right? Such a dangerous place. And that also Juarez has a temple too. So if there were good intentions going on here with the amount of money, with the amount of religious cover, you would not have that kind of violence. So you can tell that it is just religious cover. Okay. It's not genuine. It's not genuine. This is an El Paso Mormon faction cartel that is a transnational criminal organization. Well, I would say a T. I want to put a T in there. Transnational T uh, criminal organization that is working both sides because these are dual citizens. Dual citizens is what gave them the power because they could become the CID, they could become the military, they could become the FBI, they could become the judges and the lawyers and all the medical well, the medical examiner is illegal, but they could become the power structure in the United States as well as in Mexico. And with that kind of money, they rebranded. They didn't want to say, well, we're the billionaire cartels, right? The Mormon faction cartel, a laugh, laugh, laugh. You laughed at us when we went to Mexico. Well, here we are now, right? We are billionaires. Um, dirty money, absolutely dirty money. Of course, they use legitimate businesses also, but all in all, it's dirty money, and they had so much of it, they had to launder it, right? They had to launder it. They laundered it. I think that's where the Francevies came in to this whole thing, that they could launder it through gambling, right? Through the lotto. That's what my mom always called it. Through the lottery, through the um, uh, well, any of the slot machines and things like that they have. And it is seen clearly by Zorro Trust winning what $80 million lottery. I mean, really? What's the chance of that? What's the chance? It's so, and of course you have the money laundering through the strip clubs, and but you have a military base there, and you don't want to get rid of the military base. If you're a criminal organization, you want to exploit it because that equals a lot of taxpayer money, right? So and a lot of the media, because this Mormon faction and many other Mormons are a big part of Disney, a big part of NASA, big part of the media, big part of the music industry, uh, Marriott, Delta, I mean, living the American dream. Um, so they absolutely knew the propaganda, so they had access to the science, access to the intelligence, access to the border, access to the government of Chihuahua, to be their own kind of little sovereignty with defending themselves, with weapons, as I understand it. And so um, they organized. This is absolutely a transnational criminal organization, as the Trump administration has clearly designated it. And so, when I talk about and they're also into the schools, have foundations that control, like let's say UTEP, Texas Tech University Health Science Center, you know, and a lot of factories over in the Mexico side, and a lot of shelters, which equal a lot of orphanages and NGOs, and um, it gets very, very nefarious. It gets very nefarious. But I think it helps when you know just briefly. I hope that this helped everyone just briefly know where it's coming from, and that polygamy is so dangerous. It's so dangerous. And it's not, this is a cartel. This is not a true religion. They're the Mormon faction. Because if it was, with their temples and with um, their power, the money that they have, Chihuahua would be absolutely amazing. It would not be um, a killer's paradise, right? I mean, they're just killing everywhere, right? And you have all of the women being kidnapped and the children being kidnapped. And now we hear about the Cancun kidnapping for organ harvesting. And of course, in the United States, the same is going on with all the drugs. They would never, with all their money and the access that they have to weapons in Chihuahua, they would never allow all of those drugs to be so destructive if they were a true godly religion. Okay. Because they have control over the media. They could churn out a, a, a positive propaganda. Propaganda is not always evil, but theirs is. Theirs is. It's a cover job, and they could be really helping people say no to drugs, and um, yeah, uh, and really strengthen families and everything. And so then we come to Belen Rocha. Okay. Absolutely tied into this El Paso Mormon faction cartel. Absolutely, her family is tied into this whole thing with the funeral home and the mortuary operations, and with Dallas Hart and Leilani Hart, and all of the group that were circling around us at the beginning to be our friends, but then once they knew that we didn't fall for it, then they became very angry with us and were targeting us and threatening us, and trying to sabotage us in every which way. But she absolutely is with Michael Ruggiero Richards, uh, first sergeant, and the other first sergeant, Jay Paulin, and they absolutely are in the same cartel, Mormon faction, El Paso Mormon faction cartel group. Um, and it expanded into this whole funeral fraud, which gets pretty nefarious when you think of La Diabla being CJNG, um, and doing what she was doing with the illegal C-sections and the organ harvesting is just and where her family is working for Beto O'Rourke, and Beto O'Rourke is um family ranch is adjacent to Zorro Ranch. And as soon as JE gets arrested, and then his family ranch sells his family ranch, right when Zorro Ranch sells their ranch. No, it's just not coincidence. And because we have the owners of Plenitude living right beside Beto O'Rourke, um, and where is he? He was during the Walmart mass shooting, attacking President Trump with the false narrative, which is just unconscionable, really unconscionable. Um, because this group is part of the orchestration of the Walmart mass shooting. It's tied to it, the military unit that Richard was in. I mean, of course, Dallas Hart was Richard's platoon leader. Um, and Michael Ruggiero is the first sergeant. They're absolutely tied into the orchestration of the Walmart mass shooting, and we know through witness testimony that the crime scene was staged, and it was not even locked down until 48 hours later, like 2 days later. So we know that there was a lot of tampering, and the scene was staged, and we know a lot about Patrick Crucius and his ties with Allen, the city of Allen. And Belen is part of that group, y'all. Belen is part of the group that messed with the Walmart mass shooting case. And she, of course, Richard called CPS on her multiple times. She was underage. She already had a baby. Um, and he thought it necessary. Richard, you have to know him. He wouldn't have just picked up the phone and called CPS. You know, something really bad had to be going on, and it was. And it was going on bad in the barracks too, because he was in possessions of videos that he turned in. And those videos, what we were told were, they were airdropping these videos, these very sexual videos. And and we know that they were bringing in young girls like 14-year-olds to live in the barracks to be pimped out. They were compromising our soldiers and also extracting and exploiting their money, especially when they got their bonuses. Um, they were absolutely making them compromise so that they could, still fuel and weapons and ammunition and parts. Don't forget of all the different parts, and we were even told they stole vehicles. They stole vehicles, um, and so this traffic and bringing in drugs while extracting it, exploiting, um, and hurting our national security. This was an attack on national security, and what they did to Richard was an act of war. Okay, what they did to our son was an act of war. Um, but absolutely, what they were doing to our soldiers on Fort Bliss, and this was uh, organized by the chain of command. This is like Bradford Bugado in operations. Absolutely cartel. Dallas Hart, absolutely cartel. So many of these military chain of command members were cartel and working at the interest of the Mormon faction philanthropists cartel. Okay, so that's why that was so important to explain. And I know I'm going to have to do it over and over again to make my explanation better and more clear. Um, there is nothing more that these criminals want than to compromise their witnesses. Okay. They want to compromise their witness. They want to have something to blackmail them with. They want to have some dirt on them. They want to have some very kinky films on them. And this is where Richard rejected all of that. And he even warned Belen not to do OnlyFans. And he then, of course, turned her in to Child Protective Services and talked to IG and everything about what was going on Fort Bliss. So um, that's really when. So when they started retaliating against Richard, they took away his phone, and we know that. They took away his phone. He had to go get a burner phone. He, yeah. And so when Belen Rocha said, or witness information, information, um, that she called Richard's phone number 6 times the day that Richard, when they took his life. She wasn't calling Richard. She knew because my dad bought Richard a really nice iPhone as a gift and a bonus because he was a distinguished honor graduate for basic training. My dad was so proud of him that he took Richard. He went there for the graduation and he took Richard and bought him the newest iPhone as a congratulations, good job gift. So we know that he had a very nice phone, and it was taken away from him. And so when Belen was calling, she was calling the killers. She was calling those that are responsible for the death of our son. She was part of them, and this group is the very same group that are tied to the Walmart mass shooting, that use that weaponize the Walmart mass shooting um, to target President Trump in the election. And if you go back and you look at all of the Walmart mass shooting, you can absolutely see the rhetoric was a political attack against President Trump. And we know this case so well, and that means we know the Walmart case so well that I can tell you with absolute certainty that the Walmart mass shooting was orchestrated and staged, even though it was very bloody and very deadly. And there's a lot that you're going to find out about that too. Um, but that that was absolutely the purpose of it, was to attack President Trump, to damage his chances for reelection in 2020. It was a political move. It was a bloody political move. And that this is how very, very bad and evil these people are. And Belen is part of that group. And there's just so much information surrounding Belen in this. And someone summed it up really well and said she knows what happened to Richard. 100% she knows what happened to Richard. And if time allows, because every day is like breaking news, right? Every day is just huge breaking news. The whole thing with the Benito Torres is huge news, and we are responding to that absolutely. So, and with Veltri and all of that, there's just so much to document and to file. So if time allows, I'll go into more about what happened when I called Belen's mother, what happened when I called her father at the beginning of all of this, when we had to drive the CID to even interview her, when we hired a a part of the Mormon faction cartel. We didn't even know it. He posed as a private investigator when he interviewed her, and how that all happened is just very, very interesting. And that's why, with surety, I can tell you that she's part of this group, and that when she called, it wasn't to talk to Richard, it was to talk to those that had taken our son's life. And and that's really important for us to get out there. So and also that this very group is responsible for the ties with, I'm going to try to be very careful because what I want to say and what I'm allowed to say, but tied to the Walmart mass shooting. So let me see. Thank you, Laura, for coming on. Thank you so much for translating everything into Spanish. Thank you, Anicia, for coming on, and your prayers and your love. They are not only polygamous, but they worship what the Jewish worship. Uh, they have, this whole talk with Israel is interesting because the history of Israel is very tied to the Mormon faction. Okay. The whole development, the whole creation of Israel, the state of Israel is tied to the Mormon faction. And this needs to be separated from the land itself in Israel, okay? Even though they want that real estate, just like they wanted Zorro Ranch real estate, just like they wanted Little St. James real estate and St. Thomas real estate, and they want Kuwait. You have to remember that Nadal Baim went to school in Kuwait. He is a connection, and his other partners with Iran, with Kuwait, and um, I don't want to divulge too much because he is the father-in-law with terroristic threats and a Palestinian arms dealer that is the father-in-law of Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM. That's a wowzer and a double wowzer and a triple wowzer when you're talking about operations in the G3 and trafficking and thinking Iran Contra 2.0 on steroids with all the other trafficking that's going on, especially with the children. Um, it's just a huge wowzer. So, and that's being all investigated. Um, and that's why I can't really agree with what Joe Kent did and is doing and has been doing. I don't agree because it was counterterrorism, and counterterrorism absolutely would know that Iran is a very, very big threat because of all these alliances. Okay, all these alliances. Of course, it's not just Iran acting on its own, and it's not Israel acting on its own either. The whole uh, presupposition that Israel is sovereign and is the one that's controlling all of this and is not being controlled by outside forces is just really silly. It's just really silly because it only takes about 10 minutes to look up the history and see that it has a very, very close history with this Mormon faction, which is very powerful, which is the philanthropists. These are billionaires, and they have over 100 years have grown these families and this property and this these businesses, these sometimes legit, most of the time not legit businesses at the border, taking advantage of their transnational status. And but they are absolutely cartel, and they've committed the most egregious crimes. So yeah, that is that's why what Joe Kent did. Any military person with his deployments knows better, and he was SF. You don't do what you did. He did. No. That is such a betrayal of your oath. It's such a betrayal of what you're taught as a soldier. It's so mutinous against the commander in chief. While like if the Iran uh, situation was already over and then he made his remarks, that's different. But while it's ongoing, no, you leave that for the media and other commentators. No, not as the counterterrorism director. Okay. Nope. Even if you resign, you don't do what he did. His resignation letter uh, was the words of a traitor in our book, in our family. They were the words of a traitor. You just don't do that during that time. So, and I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Maybe he's young and stupid. I don't know. Because he's been deployed so many times, I can't say that he's without experience and intelligence and all of that. And he made it a lot further. Um, you know, but today, President Trump came out and said, um, he thought he'd give him a chance because he didn't get elected to Congress. He lost. He lost his wife, and so he thought he'd give him, a chance with all his experience to prove himself. Well, he proved himself to me. Um, People are calling him a hero. That's not how a hero acts, y'all. It's just not. It's just not. It's so anti-American. I'm sorry. Um, to do this, it reminds me of, uh, yeah, what was her name during the Vietnam War? Yeah, it's just not the right thing, not the way to go. He could have been much more classy and much more loyal to, because he's not privy to all the information, right? And anyone that knows about what's going on with JE and the pipeline and what's going on at the border and how it's connected to Iran and El Mencho and how El Mencho is connected to Iran. And people are saying, oh, but they never attacked anyone. Yeah, they did. They did. They just, I mean, do you call a Trojan horse an attack? I do. I do. Just because you didn't zoom in with blazes doesn't mean you're not attacking. And yeah, so I guess we're just so tuned in because of our daily investigation in all of this that things just uh, stick out when things aren't right. Because it really looks like the Mormon faction cartel business model is being protected by a lot of people. And that's not a business model that needs to be protected, y'all. It has caused so much pain and so much death and so much turmoil. So, yeah. Thank you, James, for that comment, though. And thank you for coming on and thank you for sharing. I think that made the explanation even better. Yeah. There. Well, I want to know, are they really Jewish or are they part of this Mormon faction that impersonated Jewish people, impersonated Roman Catholics, impersonated evangelicals, because this is what Candace Owens and her investigation exposed what was going on at Fort Huachuca, that they were learning how to be impersonators of different religious groups, especially Christian. Christian groups. So, and to look at what's going on in the Roman Catholic Church and all of the predators, the predator priests that were then sent to New Mexico, that area, uh, you know, um, to be rehabilitated. And what did they do? You just can't rehabilitate that. You just can't. And what did they do? They hurt so many people, and now El Paso's Roman Catholic Church is having to go bankrupt. Is having to declare bankruptcy. And was that on purpose? Is like the grand prize, the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican Bank, the Vatican Museum, the Vatican Holdings, the Vatican Land? Is that their big prize, to take that over? Because this makes, it's just a thought, because they were impersonating. And I can tell you in our son's case, uh, they are absolute impersonators. They are frauds, fakes, impersonators, tamperers. They are, they're so bad. They're just so bad. And look what they did to Belen. And my heart went out to Belen, even though I knew she knew exactly and probably was part of what happened to Richard. And it broke my heart because she was still a child. She was a child. And they trained her. They groomed her. They groomed her. But she's not a child anymore. And now she has a long record, a violent record, uh, assault with a deadly weapon, even all kinds of stuff. And she did not listen to Richard. She should have, but she didn't. She called him weird. And she now is an adult, and she's had years. We've given people years to do the right thing, and our lawsuits are going to be epic. Epic. We've warned people over and over, over and over. They've even laughed behind the scenes. Our sources have told us that they're like, oh, they haven't done anything yet, so they're not going to do anything. No, we're doing something. We are doing something, and it's going to be epic. And just because we have taken the time to do our homework, our investigation, to identify, document, and file, doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. And Belen is now an adult. She's with that group. And she absolutely needs to be held accountable for what she did. Absolutely. So, let me read some more. Good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for the love and for. Plus, Joe Kemp bragged about his numerous tours. But if you do the research, many of those tours were a month or two, and they didn't involve fighting, but drinking. Yeah, I have this. I don't know. It's like I have this spidey sense of Mormon faction people and who protect the Mormon faction pipeline and the businesses. And my spidey senses go up with him, a lot, just like with Erica Kirk. Um, and so we didn't have to be convinced too hard. It just like with Patrick Crucius and Patrick Crucius's dad and the Mayella family. Um, they're part of the Roman Catholic Church, but I don't know. And the lawyers like Chris Atcliffe, and I don't mention him very often, but it's like, I think something's going on here called impersonation to protect this Mormon faction cartel philanthropist pipeline. And they tried to rebrand uh, Jeffrey Epstein as, and I should have said his name, J.E., as a philanthropist. Can you believe that? Even after he was convicted. And so, yeah, uh, it's becoming obvious, especially to us because we're so involved. So thank you so much. God bless you.